Greetings from Kardec Radio, where we are bringing listeners another audiobook, this one entitled, Who is Afraid of Death?, written by Richard Simonetti. This fifth installment covers Chapter 8 entitled Unfailing Resource, and Chapter 9 entitled Delays in the Disconnecting Process. Enjoy! Chapter 8 Unfailing Resource. Death, except on rare occasions, is a traumatic process. After all, the spirit has to leave behind a vehicle of flesh to which it is so intimately connected, it seems an inseparable part of its individuality, or the individuality itself to materialists. On the other hand, only very few are ready for this compulsory journey when we leave the small island of physical perceptions on a course towards the glorious continent of spiritual truths. Impregnated by material interests and concerns, the travelers have to face understandable hindrances. Under such circumstances, both the patient who gradually becomes weaker and the family members who go through a painful mourning can make use of an unfailing resource, the prayer. Because of its eminently spiritual characteristics, representing an effort to overcome the earthly conditionings for a communion with heaven, the prayer favors a nice trip for those who are departing the physical world. For those who stay, it brings a soothing relief that reduces the personal feeling of loss and fills the gap left in the heart with the comforting presence of God, blessed source of confidence, balance, and serenity in every situation. However, its effectiveness is subordinated to one essential condition, the feeling we add to it. If we simply repeat words in oral formulas, we fall into an innocuous process. Only the heart is able to communicate with God, and it can do it without verbalization. Even the sublime prayer taught by Jesus, the Lord's Prayer, is not a magic tool whose efficiency is subject to repetition. It is an itinerary to be followed as we pray. It begins by telling us to be very confident because God is our Father, and it ends by inspiring us to defeat the evil inside us by systematically combating the temptations. We should give special emphasis to that incisive sentence, "Thy will be done on earth as in heaven," through which Jesus stresses that it is up to God to define what is better for us. Under any circumstance, especially in that of the great transition, if we nurture feelings of despair and non-acceptance, the prayer will not do any good, and the uneasiness will remain. When the disincarnating person and his family manage to control their emotions, cultivating through prayer feelings of confidence and humbleness, the spiritual benefactors are able to easily further the disconnection, with no major traumas for the dying one, and with no despair for those who stay. Chapter 9. Delays in the disconnecting process. Physical death and disincarnation do not occur simultaneously. The person dies when the heart stops beating. The spirit disincarnates when the disconnecting process is completed, which requires a few hours or a few days. Basically, the spirit remains bonded to the body, while the impressions from his physical existence are very strong. Materialistic people, who take up the human journey as an end in itself, who do not establish higher goals and cultivate addictions and passions, remain attached longer until the impregnated gross fluid with which they are permeated is reduced to levels compatible with the disconnecting process. It is obvious that the spiritual benefactors can release the spirit immediately after the physical death. Nevertheless, this is not advisable, because the dying person would have even greater difficulties in adjusting to the spiritual reality. What apparently seems to be a kind of punishment for the individual, who has not lived according to moral and virtuous principles, is a simple act of mercy. Despite the constraint and unpleasant sensations he might feel at the sight of his disintegrating, dead body, such circumstances are less traumatic than the immediate disconnection. There are misconceptions about death, which are totally different from reality. When someone dies from a sudden heart attack, people usually say, "What a wonderful death! He did not suffer." However, this is not a desirable death. When someone dies in full vitality, except if highly spiritualized, he will face disconnection and adaptation problems because the impressions and interests associated with his material existence will be very strong in him. When death is a consequence of cancer, after a long period of suffering, caused by sharp pains through which the patient slowly decays, fading away while alive, people say, "What a terrible death, so much suffering." Paradoxically, this is a good death. A prolonged disease is like a beauty treatment to the spirit. The physical pains serve as an invaluable therapeutic resource, helping the person to get over worldly illusions, in addition to purging, as a drain valve, the moral impurities. Notice that as the patient gradually gets worse, he becomes more receptive to religious appeals, to the benefits of prayers, to meditations on the human fate. That is why when death comes, he is more prepared, and even awaits it with no bonds nor fears. Something similar occurs to people who die very old, after fulfilling the time granted by the divine law, and leading a disciplined and virtuous life. For them, the physical life is extinguished placidly, like a candle that flickers and is extinguished after being totally used, granting them a peaceful return journey without major difficulties.